Breaking news. The Las Vegas Raiders are shaking things up once again, and this time, it's on the offensive line. A major decision has been made about the right guard position, and fans are already debating if this move will finally fix the Raiders' problems, or make them worse. Before we get into the latest updates, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you never miss breaking Raiders news. Now, let's get right into it. After weeks of frustration, the Raiders are turning back to Jackson Powers Johnson at right guard. Many fans were puzzled when he didn't take the field against the Commanders, especially since he was healthy and ready to go. Instead, the coaching staff decided to stick with Alex Cappa for one more game. That gamble didn't pay off. Cappa had one of his worst outings of the season, giving up multiple pressures and quarterback hits. The Commanders' defensive front zeroed in on him, taking full advantage and exposing the line in critical moments. Head coach Pete Carroll admitted afterward that the plan was to keep things stable for another week, but the results spoke for themselves. Cappa struggled badly, and it was clear the Raiders needed to make a change. Now, the team is officially moving Jackson Powers Johnson back into the starting lineup. Carroll stressed that the offensive line has to improve in both run blocking and pass protection if the Raiders want to compete down the stretch. He also hinted that the young depth players on the roster aren't ready yet, which means this move is all about stability and giving the offense a better chance to succeed. So here's the real question: will Jackson Powers Johnson be the spark the Raiders desperately need on the O-line, or is this just a temporary patch on a much bigger problem? Pete Carroll made it clear, the Raiders expect Jackson Powers Johnson to step back in and help solidify the offensive line. And while his return is a big move, Carroll also admitted something else: the run game still isn't where it needs to be. Now, to be fair, there has been a little progress. Earlier in the season, this offensive line was ranked near the very bottom of the league, fourth worst after just 2 weeks. But since then, things have improved. They're now sitting closer to the middle of the pack, around 15th or 16th. That's a noticeable jump. But here's the catch: a lot of that production came late in games, when the outcome was already decided. Against the Commanders, for example, some of those big runs showed up in what people call garbage time. And that raises a real question: is this line actually improving, or are the numbers just fooling us? Carroll says for now, no major changes are coming outside of right guard. But let's be real, the struggles haven't just been about Alex Cappa. Dylan Parham has had his share of issues too. At times, both players have shown flashes, but what this team desperately needs is consistency. And here's what makes it frustrating: finding quality guards and centers in today's NFL isn't nearly as difficult as landing a top-tier tackle. Every year, new rookies come into the league ready to play those interior spots at a high level. Just look at Detroit. They've got Tate Ratledge, who already looks like one of the league's best young guards, and Christian Mahogany, another player who slipped late in the draft but is making an impact. Meanwhile, the Raiders are stuck searching for answers. Yes, Powers Johnson brings some much-needed stability. But unless the team makes smarter investments in the interior of this line, the same issues will keep coming back. Some fans even argue the Raiders were stronger with last year's setup: Jordan Meredith at left guard, Parham at right guard, instead of this constant shuffling. At the end of the day, the question remains: are the Raiders truly building an offensive line that can protect their future, or are they just rearranging the same problems week after week? Here's the truth: Jackson Powers Johnson is a natural center. Anyone who's watched him on tape knows it. The technique, the awareness, the strength, he looks like a future All-Pro at that position. And yet, the Raiders continue to shuffle him around, sliding him back and forth instead of letting him settle into the role where he can thrive. It's not just hurting JPJ's development, it's hurting the team. Fans can see it. Analysts can see it. And still, the coaching staff insists on this experiment that doesn't quite add up. Some people have blamed the offensive line coach, Brennan Carroll, but let's clear something up: this decision doesn't come from him. It comes from the top. This is a head coach call. Now, don't get me wrong, having JPJ anywhere on the line makes the unit better. His presence alone strengthens the pass protection, allows the Raiders to shift help toward weaker spots like Dylan Parham, and gives the quarterback just a little more breathing room. But the constant position switching? That's a recipe for stunted growth. Either commit to him as a guard, or commit to him as a center. This back and forth is only slowing down his development and limiting what he could already be bringing to the table. And while the offensive line is its own story, there's another problem that's impossible to ignore: the Raiders' secondary. This defense has already shown some cracks, and not just once. Go back to Week 2 against the Chargers. Los Angeles moved the ball almost at will, ripping off big gains in chunks. The Raiders bent but didn't completely break, forcing field goals in the red zone, but the amount of yardage given up was alarming. Even in Week 1 against New England, the warning signs were there. Yes, the weather played a role, and yes, rookie quarterback Drake May missed a few throws. But despite that, the Raiders still gave up wide-open looks and soft coverage windows. It wasn't a one-off problem. It was the beginning of a pattern. When the Raiders lined up against the Commanders, it became painfully obvious just how predictable this defense has become. Cliff Kingsbury knew exactly what was coming, because the Raiders lean on cover 3 more than almost anyone in the league. And when an offensive coordinator knows your tendencies, it's only a matter of time before they tear you apart. Washington attacked it perfectly. Simple curl concepts, quick outs, and flat routes were all they needed. With the corners bailing deep and the linebackers pulled just far enough out of position, the passing windows were wide open. That's the weakness of a static cover 3. If you don't disguise it, you're practically giving the quarterback a roadmap on where to throw the ball. And it's not just the coverage, it's the personnel groupings too. The Raiders are playing more base defense than any other team in the NFL, often lining up with 3 or even 4 linebackers on the field. That slows you down, takes speed off the field, and makes it even easier for opponents to exploit mismatches. It showed again and again against Washington. On a critical 3rd and 2, the Raiders rolled out in cover 3, and the Commanders picked it apart for 12 easy yards. Nothing fancy, just textbook execution against a defense that everyone in the stadium knew was coming. And then came the big plays. Rookie corner Kyu Blue Kelly got caught biting on a double move, and Terry McLaurin burned him for a 56-yard touchdown. Not long after, another deep strike, this time for 43 yards, sealed the defensive collapse. By then, the game was already out of reach, but the message was loud and clear: when you refuse to adapt, the NFL will punish you. This isn't about bad players. It's about philosophy. In today's league, where passing attacks are faster, smarter, and more versatile than ever, being a heavy cover 3 team just doesn't hold up. Without adjustments, the Raiders' secondary will continue to be one of the most vulnerable units in football. Once again, the Raiders' defense was caught out of position, and this time it was costly. On what looked like a cover 0 blitz, safety Jeremy Chinn shifted with emotion but then failed to pick up the deep crosser. The result? A 43-yard strike right over the middle. Plays like this highlight a bigger issue: too many players look uncertain about their assignments. 3 games in, you'd expect more clarity, but confusion in the back end keeps showing up on film. And here's the reality: it's not just about one blown coverage. It's about the system. The Raiders are running cover 3 at one of the highest rates in the entire NFL. Everyone knows it. Offenses walk in already prepared with play designs built to exploit that look. When you tip your hand that often, you're basically daring the other team to pick you apart. The problem isn't the concept itself. Zone coverage has its place. The problem is predictability. Washington exposed it. Now the Raiders are about to face Ben Johnson, one of the brightest offensive minds in the game. If you think he won't come in armed with cover 3 beaters ready to go, you're fooling yourself. There's a reason the league has shifted toward 2 high safety shells. It started as the answer to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs' explosive offense. Defensive coordinators realized it was better to force teams into long, methodical drives instead of giving up 50-yard touchdowns in 2 plays. Make them earn every yard, don't hand it to them. Look at the top defenses right now: Green Bay, Seattle, San Francisco, the Chargers, even Arizona. All of them lean heavily on cover 2 and cover 4. The Cardinals, for example, lead the NFL in too high looks, and despite having a roster many thought would struggle, they're giving up fewer points than almost anyone. Meanwhile, the Raiders stick with a predictable single high approach, and the results speak for themselves: chunk plays, blown coverages, and touchdowns that come far too easy. If Las Vegas wants to climb out of this hole, it's not just about effort or execution. It's about evolution. Until they adapt, opposing coordinators will keep drawing up the same plays, and the Raiders will keep paying the price. Right now, the defenses having the most success in the NFL are leaning on too high safety looks. And that's where my concern really grows with the Raiders. Week after week, we're showing a heavy dose of cover 3, and worse than that, we're relying far too much on base defense. Think about it, linebackers just don't hold up in coverage the way corners and safeties do. Yet the Raiders have rolled out their base package over 120 times already, trotting out guys like Roberts, Pratt, and Devin White almost constantly. Even Tommy Eichenberg has seen some snaps. And while Jamal Adams is technically labeled as a safety, in reality, he plays more like a linebacker. But here's the problem: when you keep stacking linebackers on the field, you're asking for mismatches against modern offenses that are built to attack space. What needs to change? It's not about abandoning cover 3 completely, but there has to be more variety. Mix in cover 1. Send pressure from unexpected places. Show one look pre-snap, then rotate into something else. The great defenses disguise their intentions. The Raiders, far too often, are laying their cards face up on the table. Now, there were a few bright spots. Darian Porter quietly logged 16 snaps at corner, and the fact that you barely noticed him is actually a good thing. For a young player, being invisible can mean he did his job, kept his man in check, and didn't give up the big play. That's the kind of development this defense desperately needs. But the road ahead won't be forgiving. The Bears are next, and make no mistake, this is not a team you can sleep on. Follow that up with the Colts, and suddenly, if things don't tighten up, the Raiders could be staring at a 1-4 record. And here's the kicker: according to reports, half the seats at Allegiant Stadium will be filled by Bears fans this weekend. That's not a home field advantage, that's a neutral site game at best. It's one of the harsh realities of the Raiders' move to Las Vegas. Sure, it opened the door for more money and bigger opportunities, but it also means every home game feels like a road test. Against teams like the Chargers, that's fine, their fanbase barely exists. But against a storied franchise like Chicago? The Raiders are going to feel the noise. The next 2 weeks could define this season. Either this defense finds its identity, or things could spiral fast. Opening night in Vegas was supposed to feel electric, but when half the stadium is filled with Bears fans, that energy turns fast. Think about it, the Raiders lining up at home, yet forced to use a silent count because the noise is against them. That's not just frustrating, it's downright embarrassing for a franchise built on pride and toughness. But here's the truth: the only cure is winning. Fans will travel and the seats will fill, but unless the Raiders put a stronger product on the field, Allegiant will keep feeling like neutral ground. Now, looking ahead, there's another wrinkle worth watching. The Tennessee Titans just shook up their staff, handing play-calling duties over to quarterbacks coach Charles London. If that name sounds familiar, it should. He briefly stepped in as the Raiders' interim play caller a couple of years back when Josh McDaniels was let go. And here's where it gets even more interesting: Titans head coach Brian Callahan comes from a deep coaching bloodline. His father, Bill Callahan, once led the Raiders himself and is still regarded as one of the sharpest offensive line coaches in football. If things start unraveling in Tennessee and the Callahans become available, you'd have to imagine the Raiders taking a hard look. After all, this offensive line has talent, but it desperately needs the kind of detail and discipline Bill Callahan is known for. As for the Titans' matchup itself, don't overlook it. Their offense is in transition, their play caller is brand new, and games like these can swing either way. For the Raiders, this could be the kind of opportunity that defines whether they sink further into frustration or finally claw their way back into the fight. The stakes are rising, the margin for error is shrinking, and the coming weeks may tell us everything about the true identity of this team.